그래서
I think I'm gonna film myself.
어. I didn't even compare YouTube and Zoom like that. Oh.
No, that's not Mario, that's wonderful. Very different. You don't know your 5 ratings?
Okay, everyone. Welcome to the first class on the essence of Chassidus. Everybody has a little pamphlet that I printed, and I'll tell you briefly what it is, and then we'll start.
It's playing a video. It's a little bit delayed.
It's a little bit delayed.
Yeah.
It's like a video. Okay.
Ah.
Oh, because it's Zoom.
It's Zoom going on YouTube, so nobody's watching on Zoom. And since we just went on YouTube the second, nobody's watching on YouTube either, but they will. And because I get feedback, so we just started this. We have it on. We have my showroom on Spotify.
Oh, that's what comes up.
There you go. We have my showroom on Spotify up until now, but a few people asked me make it more available, put it on YouTube, etc. So that's what we're gonna be trying to do, God willing. So tonight's topic is we called it On the Essence of Chassidus, and we're going to study an excerpt of a talk delivered by the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 1965. The talk was not called On the Essence of Chassidus, but years later they put it together in this little book over here called On the Essence of Chassidus, and some people decided that it was so important they would translate it into English and put footnotes to it and all that kind of stuff. It's very long and very, very complicated. So that's why on the cover of the little handout I made, it says an excerpt, because we're only going to study an excerpt of this talk. And hopefully that will give a little bit of flavor and a little bit of taste. Now, the goal in the class tonight is to answer a question that a lot of people wonder. And I know that a lot of people wonder because a lot of people ask me. And the question is, what is Chassidus? That's the question. Now, spoiler alert, I'm not going to answer the question. I'm not going to answer the question of what is, sorry, Emily, I'm sorry. I'm not going to answer the question of what is Chassidus. Rather, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, well, I'm not going to, we're going to study the Rebbe's lead on this. We're going to take one text in Judaism that I think everybody is probably going to be somewhat familiar with, or maybe even very familiar with. And we're going to study that according to different levels of Torah interpretation, known as the Pardes. Pardes means an orchard. It's a Rashi Tevis, means it's an acronym. Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Soy, which translates roughly as the contextual meaning, the allusion, that is what something hints towards. Then you have the hermeneutical, the philosopher, hermeneutical interpretation, meaning non-literal. That's the drush. Then the soid is the meaning according to Kabbalah. Those are the 4 meanings of the Pardes, the 4 levels of interpretation of Torah. And then we're going to introduce a 5th level, which I told you I'm not going to define, but that's going to be the level that we're going to call Chassidus. So all in all, we're going to end up with 5 interpretations of the same text in Judaism. And we're going to hopefully, although I won't define Chassidus, we're hopefully going to get a taste for what it is, how it behaves, and what it does. Now, I was speaking with Sippa earlier today, and she gave me a great mashal. If you go into the ocean, scientists and marine biologists and so forth can describe to you the different layers of the ocean. Whereas on the surface, you only have certain types of creatures. The deeper down you go, you're more limited in what type of creatures can go deeper. And if you go even deeper, where there's not even any light, doesn't even reach there, and it's freezing cold, even more limited to what type of creatures can live at the bottom of the ocean, right? So if we look at only the surface level, let's say, I don't know, however many feet or meters down, you're only going to get one view of what the ocean contains. If you go even beneath that, you go even deeper in the ocean, you'll get another layer of what the ocean contains, and so on and so forth. None of these layers of the ocean contradict one and the other. Just because there are certain types of fish, angler fish, I think they're called, with like a little thing on their head with like a little light bulb coming from. Such a real thing as that? Yeah. Even those angler fish at like some tremendous depth of the ocean. Just because you don't see what? They angle. Just because you don't see those angler fish at like 10 feet beneath the water and up, doesn't mean they don't exist. They very much exist. You just don't see them on that level. So similarly, the Torah has multiple layers of interpretation. They don't contradict each other. They actually enhance each other and shed more light on the different layers. Just like diving deeper beneath the surface of the ocean, what you saw at the top of the ocean will not contradict what you see at the bottom. It will enhance your understanding and your perspective. Questions or comments so far? Okay. So, what are we going to examine in tonight's class? The answer is Modeh. The very first prayer that's printed in the Siddur, the very first prayer that we're supposed to say when we wake up in the morning, Modeh ani lefanecha, I acknowledge you, Hashem, that you gave me back my neshama, you gave me back my soul, with compassion, and your compassion is great. That's the Modeh ani we're meant to start the day with. Now, why are we going to study Modeh ani specifically? Of all the Jewish texts and verses and prayers and so on and so forth, why are we going to zero in on Modeh ani? A few things. By the way, if there's questions along the way, please interject. If I say something that doesn't make sense, or you want to clarify, please ask. So, why Modeh ani? So first of all, for starters, why Modeh ani? A person is meant to begin their day by reciting Modeh ani, by acknowledging that we're not here because of our own power. We're here only because in God's graciousness, He let me wake up in the morning. So just like I want to start my day by remembering that Hashem is in charge and Hashem determines what happens, this is actually the foundation. It's not just how I start my day, it's the foundation of the entire day. So the Modeh ani prayer is not local, it's global. Because it's going to be relevant throughout the entire day, as I'm always going to want to be recentering and having Modeh ani moments throughout the day. So this is not just a one-off prayer that I say once, it's global, so to speak. Number one. Number two, Modeh ani is about waking up. So don't we all want to wake up? Everyone wants to have an experience when they feel, wow, my eyes have been opened. I've woken up. I've seen, I've gained insight, new perspective. So Modeh ani alludes also to this idea of waking up, so to speak, waking up and ready to go forward into the day, to go forward into my Jewish life, and so forth. Okay, that's a little bit about why Modeh ani. Now, you have your pamphlets. Everybody ready? We're going to jump right in. No holds barred. We're going to jump right in. Here we go. I'm going to read in Hebrew because I like Hebrew. So that's what I'm going to read in Hebrew. I'm going to translate, and you have right in front of you also the English translation. There are some notes on the bottom of the page as well. And again, please feel free to stop me if you have any questions or comments. Inyana shel Modeh ani on page 57 in the pamphlet, which is page 2 or 3, depending on you measure it. Inyana shel Modeh ani al pi chelik hapshat shebetorahu. Okay, so first we're going to attack Modeh ani, if you will, from the interpretation level called pshat. Pshat, many times people translate it as simple. It's not necessarily anything to do with simple at all. Pshat more accurately would be translated as contextual meaning. Even though in our English translation that we have in front of us, they translate it as the plain meaning. I do take issue with that translation. And they didn't ask me, but if I were writing the translation, I would translate it as the contextual meaning of a verse. It's not necessarily plain. It certainly is not necessarily simple, but it's contextual. So what is the contextual meaning of Modeh ani? Very simple. In this case, it is simple in many ways. I'm going to see later, maybe it's not so simple, but we are acknowledging Hashem, we're thanking Hashem that I woke up today, that you gave me back my soul. Meaning that the Gemara tells us that when a person goes to sleep, it's 1/60th of death. It's like a taste of death. So if you woke up, it's a little bit like, wow, I got my neshama back. I'm experiencing this anew. I got my neshama back. Now, even though you're going to say, well, 1 second, I don't need to say Modeh ani for that. Just fast forward a little bit of the Siddur, and we have another bracha, which is actually a bracha. Modeh ani is not even a bracha. It's just like a statement. It doesn't contain Hashem's name or anything. It's just a statement. Yeah.
But shouldn't that be a bracha?
Yes, seemingly it should be. We're going to get to that. It's a good question. Yeah. Here's your question. Even though we do say a bracha, al hachzor haneshama birkas alakai neshama, even though we actually do say an actual bracha, acknowledging that God gives me back my neshama. Again, fast forward in your siddur, it's probably even on the same page. Shechazarta b'nishmasi. I'm sorry, that's the bracha called Elokai neshama. Elokai neshama sheno sato bi. God, the neshama that you put into me, and that's a bracha. So why are we saying moda'ani at all? Just cut to the chase, say a bracha. If you can't say a bracha, so don't. But if you can say a bracha, as we do, Elokai neshama, then why don't we just skip moda'ani? What is moda'ani adding? It's not a bracha. We also have to say moda'ani. Why? Because the requirement, the obligation to acknowledge and thank God for getting my soul back is immediately as soon as you wake up. With me so far? And just like if you want to have some delicious lentil soup or some shawarma chicken, you're supposed to recite a bracha, not after you eat, but before you eat. Well, after also, but you make a bracha before you eat. So too, the bracha that we're going to say for the single greatest benefit that we could have in life, which is life itself, the benefit and the pleasure and the joy of life itself is greater than the pleasure of any shawarma you're going to have anywhere, right? So therefore, we're obligated to make a bracha immediately upon awakening. Why not make the bracha while you're still sleeping? Because you're sleeping. Right. So therefore, since you can't make a bracha when you're sleeping, because you're sleeping, so as soon as you wake up, you really are obligated to thank Hashem for giving you back your neshama. You should technically say a bracha. However, you're not allowed to say a bracha at that moment. Why not? But since the bracha of Elokai neshama, bracha has God's name in it. You're not allowed to recite God's name before you wash your netilas yadayim, before you wash your hands in the morning. Therefore, since we're not allowed halachically to recite an actual bracha as soon as we wake up because it contains God's name, and I did not yet wash my hands, therefore, seemingly, we'll do the second best thing, which is say, and keep that in your mind, because we're going to see later, maybe it's not the second best. We'll get back to that. We do the quote-unquote second best thing, and we say moda'ani, which does not feature Hashem's name, because we're not allowed to. But since there's an obligation to thank Hashem right away, like someone gives you a gift, right? When do you thank them? Right away or later? You thank them right away, if you're a mensch at least, right? Should I thank a person for a gift right away? So do Hashem gives you the greatest gift, which is the gift of life, you got to thank him right away. But you're not allowed to say a bracha at that moment. So we don't. If we already said moda'ani, why not? Why do we need to say Elokai neshama? Why do we need to say an actual bracha afterwards? I already thanked Hashem. Yeah.
Is it because we're impure, so we have to do it like that?
Very good. Very good. Right. So when we wake up, since we had a taste of death while sleeping, and we're not in control of our bodies really while we're sleeping, therefore we have to wash our netilas yadayim. We have to wash our hands when we wake up in the morning. Let's see.
Well, why don't we ask the question the opposite way? If we have like an obligation to say at a time, which is a bracha, why don't we say moda'ani at all? It seems not much.
Right. That's a great question. We're gonna talk about that a little bit more, God willing, as we go on. But the simple answer, if I could say the word simple, is because we're obligated to say thank you immediately when we have the first opportunity to say thank you, which as soon as I wake up, I'm obligated to say thank you. So I say thank you. Thank you is known as moda'ani. But for technical reasons, I'm not allowed to say God's name, so I can't say a bracha.
Right, but we're saying like you're obligated to say moda'ani.
You're obligated really to say a bracha. You're obligated to thank Hashem, but you're not technically allowed to.
We do say the bracha.
Later.
Yeah.
And that's the question now. But so why do we need to say the bracha afterwards at all? Like I already said thank you, and a minute later I'm like, oh, thanks again. I already said thank you. So that's what he says now.
It seems like the second one has a bit more concrete stand
It absolutely has more of a concrete standing. Exactly. You're 100% correct. But as soon as I wake up, at my first opportunity to say thank you, I say thank you, which is modani.
So it's like a nice thing to do,
What do you mean a nice thing to do?
meaning it doesn't have like some sort of halachic or obligatory basis. It's just like, oh, it's a nice thing to do. You say.
The obligatory basis is that we are obligated, according to halacha, to say a bracha technically before we derive benefit from anything in this world. Whether it's an apple or some shawarma or life itself.
So why don't we thank God before we go to sleep?
Well, we kind of actually do.
Okay.
Before we go to sleep, there is a bracha before you go to sleep. Well, Shema is not a bracha, but we do recite the Shema at nighttime. But then there's also a bracha that is basically indicating, God, I'm sending my neshama up, pulling up the elevator. It's going to go up tonight, and it's in your hands.
Please send it back down.
Please send it back down tomorrow morning, but it's in your hands. So we kind of do say a bracha at nighttime. Not kind of, we do. It's not thanking God for life. It's saying, hey, my day is finished today, so my neshama goes back up. But like we said, but please give it back to me tomorrow morning. So if we already said moda'ani, if we already thanked Hashem, then why go back and say a bracha afterwards? But we still have to say a bracha afterwards, even though seemingly it's redundant, because we already said thank you. It's like thank you and thank you again. Okay, why? Number one, it's more specific. It's like if you go to someone's house for Shabbos dinner, there's two ways to say thank you, right? One is to say thanks. The other is to say thank you so much for dinner. The chicken, was fantastic. To be specific. So moda'ani is a very general thing. Thanks for giving me back my soul. Very general. Elokai neshama, which is the actual bracha, is much more detailed. We're thanking Hashem not just for life, but in a detailed manner. Not just for Shabbos dinner, but for the chicken and for the potato kugel. And I really enjoyed the string beans or whatever it was. That was great. It's more detailed, more specific. It's a more gishmak type of thank you. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of giving like a down payment or some sort of like installment. And then when you say hello kind of shama, it's like paying the rest of it.
Okay.
It's like, I'm coming right back. Just let me wash. And it's like, hey, I'm back. Thank you so much.
Okay. Very nice. Yeah, very nice. So number one, Elokai neshama, the actual bracha is not just a repeat thank you. It's a more detailed and in-depth and specific thank you. Additionally, the moda'ani ein bo azkaras Hashem. Additionally, in moda'ani we don't have Hashem's name in it, which is seemingly a deficiency. Why do we not have Hashem's name in moda'ani? You're not allowed to say Hashem's name at that time because you didn't wash your hands yet in the morning. But Elokai neshama bracha she'ein ba shem malchus ein a bracha. And technically, if you want to be technical about it, a bracha that doesn't have Hashem's name is not a bracha. So moda'ani wasn't the bracha. So number one, Elokai neshama is more detailed. It's a more specified thank you. And number two, moda'ani wasn't even a bracha. Secret. It wasn't even a bracha. Elokai neshama, Hashem's name, that's a bracha. So what's moda'ani? Like, okay, that's what I was able to say. I couldn't say more, so I said moda'ani. What do you want from me? Now, a little bit of historical information that you might find intriguing. Continuing on page 59. Fascinating. Did you know that in the times of the Gemara, they did not say moda'ani? They cut straight to the chase. Why say moda'ani? It's not specific and it's not even a bracha. They cut straight to the chase in the times of the Gemara, and they just woke up and said Elokai neshama, the actual bracha, with all the details.
Before washing their hands?
But, yes, before washing their hands. Why? Because moda'ani doesn't add anything to the mix. On the contrary, moda'ani has less in it than Elokai neshama, has fewer features, and it's not even a bracha. So why? I don't want to say why waste your time, that doesn't sound nice. But why waste your time with moda'ani when you could cut straight to the chase and say the actual bracha that's specifically thanking Hashem for the phenomenal life that we have? Now, Why, one second, why is that? How do they do that? Why don't we do that? Why don't we cut straight to the chase? Cut out Moda'ani, the sitter. Don't actually cut it out, by the way. So why do they do that in the times of the Gemara? And we'll get to your question in 1 second. But nowadays we don't do that. Nowadays we say Moda'ani also. Why? Is just so that we can fulfill the idea of saying thank you right away. Again, rather than taking a gift and just like hanging out, looking around and thanking the person 3 weeks later, they're wondering if you even got the gift. You ever get one of those phone calls? Hi, did you get the gift I sent? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to thank you. You feel like an idiot, right? You don't have to raise your hands and admit it. 1 second, we're gonna have soon questions or comments. So we really need to thank Hashem for our giving us our soul immediately. That's really what we need to do. But in their days, meaning in the times of the Gemara, things were different spiritually. They were on a more elevated spiritual level, and therefore they were able to say a bracha with Hashem's name immediately upon awakening. But today, it's a different world, it's a different state, we're in a different place. So we can't say God's name. So therefore, we say Moda'ani because we want to make sure to thank Hashem for the gift without delay. So they shouldn't have to call us. Did you get the gift I sent? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So we thank right away. But again, since Moda'ani is not actually a bracha and it's not specific enough, therefore we also say Elokai Neshama. That is the end of the Pshat explanation. Now we had a couple of questions or comments. Still?
Yeah. I was gonna say, also kind of like we say in Asher Yitzhar that had Hashem made one opening or one closing that was off, we wouldn't be here. The same way if Hashem hadn't returned our neshama right away, we wouldn't be there. So if we didn't try to reciprocate that, even though obviously we're not Hashem and we can't say Hashem's name in like the same exact way he always keeps us alive, we try to like match it, reciprocate by thanking him right away.
Okay. Very nice. Very nice. Matthew, question or comment?
I'm not sure if it's a new question, might be the same question before, but you said like fulfill the idea. I'm just having trouble like characterizing what modality is
Good.
in like some sort of halachic or like what makes it
Okay.
what it is.
So you're saying what status does Moda'ani have? What's the halachic status? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So we mentioned that's a good
Is
question.
it a minhag?
It's not a minhag, no. It's a halacha. It's part of the nusach of tefillah. It's part of the davening. And the idea basically, which we did touch on before, is that there's an obligation to recite a bracha before enjoying food, for example. Right? So similarly,
But it's not a mere bracha of God.
well, that's Birchas Hanen. Birchas Hanenin is a bracha over enjoying something.
It's not, we're not saying thank you.
You could parse it out and maybe go either way. But bracha for food is called Birchas Hanen. That means a bracha for having... right, so it's not exactly parallel, but the idea is that if we're having enjoyment or pleasure from some shawarma and a lentil soup and so on and so forth, as we did tonight, you have to recite a bracha for that, for the pleasure of it. So if that's pleasurable, you wouldn't be able to enjoy the shawarma if you weren't alive. Everything comes, silly statement, right? Obviously. Everything comes down to one thing, which is life itself. No pleasure in life, no enjoyment would be possible if you didn't have life. Life is the single greatest pleasure that there is. The very act of being alive, there is no greater pleasure than that, which is why the single greatest drive that a human being has is the drive for self-preservation, which typically takes place in two ways, right? Number one, eating. Person knows if I don't eat, I'm not going to make it very long. And number two, procreation. Because procreation is maybe not having anything to do with me living longer per se, but in a sense, it's I'm still going to live. I'm passing on my family line, so to speak. So these are the two strongest drives typically that a human being has, because those are connected to the very pleasure of life itself. So if I would make a bracha not if I would make. If I'm required, since you're asking about the halachic side of it, right? If I'm required to make a bracha before enjoying a piece of chicken or a cup of tea, mint tea, then all the more so I should recite a bracha before enjoying life itself. Does that make any sense?
It makes sense. Don't we do that in Shemona Esrei? Like, why do we need to do it in the morning?
Because you have to say thank you right away.
Well, then why do we do it elsewhere?
Why do we do it elsewhere?
Yeah, I'm just not trying.
Okay, no problem. So the reason we do it right away is because you say thank you right away.
But we're always living.
So start at the beginning.
So we say Shemona Esrei in the morning. Like, by mode.
Shemona Esrei has nothing to do with the morning per se.
It's got time. It's got times.
Okay, I don't want to get into a whole lot of discussion about this because it's not relevant to this talk. But no, Shemona Esrei has nothing to do with the morning. Shemona Esrei is a prayer. It's not intrinsically connected to the morning or the evening or the afternoon. It's just a prayer. We recite it in the morning and the afternoon and the evening.
Okay.
So it's the same Shemona Esrei all the time. It's not intrinsically connected to the morning.
So we have Moda Ani and Elokai Neshama
Correct.
that are the same obligation, but one's a bracha and one is not.
More or less. Yeah, that's right. That is the pshat, simple, plain, or as I would prefer, contextual meaning of Moda Ani. Okay, ready to move on to the next level of interpretation? Try to keep it in your head a little bit. Remez. Remez means,
Sun.
say it,
Sun.
sign.
Hint.
I don't know if it means a sign.
Clue.
Illusion. So what do you mean by sign?
I'm not sure.
Okay, let's go with a hint or an allusion. To allude to something else.
You said
Correct, you
illusion,
did say.
no? Or you
Yeah.
said delusion.
I said illusion
Okay.
because the rabbi said it like 20 minutes
Oh.
ago.
Boss is almost paying attention. It's being streamed live so we can check up to see if I actually said it. Okay.
Also, clue is a good
Not
one.
lying.
Flu. Okay, let's read okay, now we're gonna shift gears. We're gonna dive deeper beneath the surface of the ocean. We're leaving behind whoever's hanging out in the top 10 meters or whatever it is of the ocean. We're digging now, swimming down deeper, hold your breath, to a deeper layer within the ocean. We're gonna find different creatures here. So we're entering a completely different area. So now let's analyze the level of remez, illusion, or the hint contained within Moedani. What's Moedani about? It's about getting back your neshama, getting back your soul. So hachzoras haneshama b'chol boker roimezes l'tchis hamesim. Getting back your neshama in the morning is not the resurrection of the dead, because you didn't actually die. It's alluding to the resurrection of the dead. How so? Kishena, because sleeping, he echad mishishin bemiso, is considered, the Gemara tells us, like 1/60th of death. Therefore, so consequently, so getting back to your neshama is not the resurrection of the dead, but it's like, it alludes to, it hints towards the resurrection, the revival of the dead. That's what it means when we say that Modani L'fanecha, I'm acknowledging you, Hashem, I'm thanking you, Hashem, you gave me back my soul. Rabba emunasecha, great is your faith. What? We're saying to God, hey, good faith. Great is your faith. What are we talking about? Great is your, with a capital Y, great is your faith. What does it mean? As follows. This is all on the level, remember, of remez, of a hint. It's not direct. So from the fact that Hashem gives me back my neshama is an indication, is a hint towards the idea that Rabba emunasecha, your faithfulness is great, that you, Hashem, will resurrect the dead. So we're in a sense translating from one language to another, so to speak. So it's not exactly direct, it's indirect. we're hinting towards the resurrection of the dead. Just like when I go to sleep, what does it mean 1/60th of death? How do you measure how dead you are, how alive you are? You,
So you do the exact same thing, 69, to do the exact same thing.
okay, I like that. I like that. Let's think about it physiologically. When a person is sleeping, what position are they in? Lying prone, just like a dead person. What happens to their bodily functions? Well, the rate of breathing decreases, the heart rate slows down, the body temperature, everything. So it, God willing, they're not going to die. But that's what happens when a person dies, is their bodily, their signs of life slow down. So is it actually death? No, of course, if it was death, you wouldn't wake up in the morning. It's not actually death. So it's merely a remez, an illusion towards the resurrection of the dead. Questions or comments? Okay, so that's pretty much our time for tonight, unless there's any last questions or comments before we go. Some people look like they're perplexed, confused, excited, and all of the above.
I was confused.
Go
Are you
ahead.
saying, so I thought what we're discussing is like that in the Torah, there's allusion in the paragraph, but it sounds like what you're saying is that the very act of falling asleep is where the illusion is, not in the text. Or is it both?
That's a great question. It's a great question. What do you guys think? Where do we see the allusion to the resurrection? Is it in the act of sleeping, falling asleep, and then waking up again in the morning? Or is it in the text itself?
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both. Can you explain?
Because falling asleep and waking up is reminiscent of death, like you said, but then Moda Ani is in recognition of that. So
Okay. Yes.
To a certain extent, the reason why we are waking up again is to continue to thank Hashem, serve Hashem. So I think it's reminiscent that way, that the way in which you would merit Tchiyat HaMetim is if we were going, like when Mashiach comes, you're going to serve Hashem.
Okay.
So it's in a similar way. You are waking up, and then following waking up, you immediately thank Hashem.
Okay. And Jesse, what do you think? Is it only in the act of falling asleep and waking up, or is it also in the text of Modani?
Well, I don't know the text of what I mean, like one or the translation well enough to say, but I definitely see it in the act of going to sleep.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if it now is it like that with other parts of the Torah where it's actually in the act of what we do, the illusion is, or the layers are, or is it in the text? Or does it depend?
So it depends. That not always will a remez, this hint interpretation, this illusion interpretation, not always will it necessarily be found in the act that's being described in the Torah. Not necessarily. In the case of Moda'ani, yes, I think very much we see it in the act of falling asleep. That's the parallel towards death, but not death. That's why it's only hinting towards it. And then the resurrection seen in the act of waking up, which is again not the resurrection of the dead, but it parallels it or it alludes to it. So number one, it's in the act. But number two, it's in the actual text of Moda'ani as well. We say the words, Shehechazarta bi nishmasi. Or I'll say it in the more of Israeli pronunciation, Shehechazarta bi nishmati. You've given me back my soul. What, if anything, is the resurrection of the dead? Is a body getting its soul back, coming back to life. So it's found both in the act that's being described here as well as the actual text. Will it always be that way? And every time we enter the world of remez, will we always encounter that? Not necessarily. Every remez is a remez. It's an illusion. It hints towards something else. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
It's sort of a different question.
Yeah,
So the idea is that when we go to sleep, our soul is no longer our body, right?
don't jump to conclusions.
Is that no? That was a question.
Ah.
So is that not
Well, you know what that would be called if your soul's not in your body anymore.
dead?
Right.
Right.
Then it wouldn't be a 60th of death. It would be like Moti said, a 60th and then another 60th until you get 60 of them.
That
And
was
then,
kind of my question. So it's still in our body, but it's also in
Yes.
God's hands.
yes, so we part of this talk that I mentioned before that is very long. Part of it actually addresses the different levels of the soul, which we may, well, we probably will tie in later on, depending on how much time we have next week and so forth, depending how deep we'll go into it, depending on the questions and the discussion and so forth. But there are, in brief, 5 levels of the soul, and they're not necessarily all within you at any given point in time, to keep it simple. So when you go to sleep, if your soul completely left you, then how are you alive? So it's elements or aspects of your soul that do, so to speak, go back up on high, so to speak, to get a battery recharge. And then in the morning, boom, come back in, you wake up and say, oh, Modan lefanecha, thank you, Hashem, you gave me back my soul. But you never actually died. So your soul, your neshama is still within you, but there are, let's call them parts of the neshama, and I can't really use the word part with something that's infinite, because it's infinite, so anytime you divide it, it's still infinite. But yes, part of the neshama that goes up to heaven and gets a recharge before coming back. Yeah. Yes.
Let's say you pull off an all-nighters. Are you able to say modality?
That's a good question.
So that's a college student question. Let's say you pull an all-nighter and
Or triple one.
I'm like, when can I go to sleep already? Like, when is bedtime?
You gotta wait 2 days because if you stay up 2 days, then the first day it feels like your soul has already left you.
Okay. So there's in halacha there's different discussions about what you can and cannot say if you pulled an all-nighter. Which blessings are you allowed to say? Which blessings you're not allowed to say? There's a whole body of halachic literature on this, and there are different customs about in different communities how to rule within that halachic body of discussion. So
Zalmi says no, because he just told me.
Zalman says no, if you didn't actually wake up.
No, he says because your neshama only goes up when you sleep.
Right, right.
It comes up on Shavuos, by the way. Some people stay up all night, they
That's what I'm saying, is that there's a whole body of literature of what to say, what not to say. So yes, Moda Ani, it's a little hard to thank God for giving your soul back if it never left you. But there are the other blessings that kind of go along with Moda Ani, the morning blessings. And again, with that in particular, the whole bunch of discussion, say them, not say them, maybe you could, some of them yes, some of them no, it's a whole bunch of discussion. But in brief, you're not going to thank Hashem for giving you back your soul if it didn't happen, because you never went to sleep. In brief. Any other comments or questions before we wrap up for tonight? Okay, on the agenda, on the menu for next week, not the food, on the agenda for next week are the next 2 interpretations, the level of Drush, which is the non-literal level or hermeneutical for us philosophy people, the non-literal level of interpretation. I'm going to warn you, it's a little bit complicated, that one, but we're going to do it, God willing. And then we're going to do the 4th level, which is the Kabbalah, the interpretation of Kabbalah. And then, if we have time next week, we'll also do the interpretation of Chassidus, all of Modan. Okay, so we're going to scuba dive deeper into the ocean. Thanks everyone for coming, and see you next time.